Welcome back to Wounded for War. Today we are going to start a new series of talks I'm really excited about. I've been waiting to do this one for quite a while, actually. It's been on my heart to do this. It's about encounters Jesus has with people in the Bible and what comes about from those relationships and what we see in the interaction between how Jesus deals with people and how people are treated by Jesus and what comes about from their relationships. Today, in particular, we're going to be talking about it's basically what does Jesus think about a non-Christian's faith? What does Jesus think about a non-Christian's faith? That's what we're going to see. We're going to look at a story that explains that and tells us the answer to it. We're going to find it in the Bible. There's a book called Matthew. There's chapter 8, verse 5 through 13. It's a story about a Roman centurion or an individual that's equal to what we would call a captain today in the military. And he has a dilemma he brings to Jesus. So let's start in there. We're going to start at verse 5 and 6, and it says this: As Jesus entered the village of Capernaum, a Roman captain came up in a panic and said, "Master, my servant is sick. He can't walk. He is in terrible pain." Jesus said in verse 7, "I'll come and heal him." Let's stop there for a second. I want you to notice a few things right off the bat. And that's that there's a relationship element between this captain and his servant. And I want you to see how this captain approaches Jesus. Notice it says that he comes up to him in a panic, that the captain runs up to Jesus in a panic. That tells you the state in which he's running up to him, but it also shares how he feels about his servant. There's a sense of urgency this guy has, and he's pretty distraught. And what does he have to say about, how does he describe the state of his servant? He says he's sick, he can't walk, he's in terrible pain. This man is displaying characteristics of an individual that cares about someone. This is kind of the description. If my wife gets sick, I'm rushing into a doctor and I'm panicked. and I have a sense of urgency that's displayed, right? That's what's going on here. This guy cared about him. But what's unique about that isn't that he cared, a person caring about another person. It's their relationship. You see, he was a captain and he was panicked and worried about a servant. Now, it's not like today, master and servant. Back then was slave and master. You went and you bought your servants as slaves on an auction block, brought them in, and they were to be used for help. Today, I go to my job, and my boss, he's just the boss, right? I get to go home at the end of the day. I have my own freedoms. I'm not a slave. I'm just a worker. There's an exchange of money, but today, my freedom is my freedom. In this case, this guy was not free, and he was absolutely just a commodity. Now, there are some cases where we see the type of man someone or woman someone is, and we know that they're just a loving individual, right? But in this case, he's a captain of an army. This guy, have you ever seen a drill sergeant? That's the equivalent. This guy's not nice. He has to rule a lot of people. He has to tell men to do hard things, train them in hard ways. This was the Roman army. They were known for some of the Spartans, right? These these dudes are gnarly warriors. They weren't wimps. They weren't asking, hey, do you mind if you just go do this for me? Now, this guy knew about commanding people, and he probably didn't come off as a caring individual. My boss is a caring individual, but our society's different today. He's not telling me to go out to war, right? Sometimes it feels that way, but it's not. I'm not putting my life on the line, right? And so this is a very strange dynamic. We have a guy who, in all intent and purposes, should be an individual who's pretty harsh, and yet he has this care and concern at a level that he's panicked over. And he's rushing up to Jesus, and he's displaying the utmost concern for this servant. Now, Jesus is on his way to do something. This man stops him. Why does Jesus stop, reroute his day, and go and help this man? There's a lot of urgency out in the world. Jesus probably had, other urgent matters if he was just dealing on urgency. He saw this man's care for another man. And as the story goes, and you probably have heard this, Jesus gave his life for the world. But not just for the world as in the dirt, the trees, the cars. No, he came for the people. He was most concerned with his creation, but specifically the ones he made in his own likeness, it says in the Bible. Jesus, saw that this man cared about people the way he cared about people. And I think that was the unique factor that made Jesus say, I'll heal him. Now, what kind of blows me away is the next part a little bit, because if I'm this guy, I'm like, let's go. I grab Jesus' hands and we roll out, right? But I ain't letting him go till that servant's healed because I care about him that much. In this case, he goes on to say his next statement after Jesus says, hey, I'll go with you. Let's roll. The captain comes back with this. Oh, no, said the captain. I don't want to put you to all that trouble. Just give the order and my servant will be fine. I'm a man who takes orders and gives orders. I tell a soldier, go, and he goes. I tell one to come, and he comes. To my slave, I say, do this, and he does it. So this guy is clearly stating he understands authority. You don't need to even come. Just say the word, and my servant's healed. Now, what he's displaying here is a unique kind of faith, and we're going to hear Jesus say that in a moment. But think about this for a minute. You and I both would grab him by the hand, most likely, and bring him to the 1 week. If it's my wife and the doctor, and I got to go grab the doctor, I'm getting him, I'm bringing him back. I'm not letting him out of my sight until he's back and he heals my wife. This guy trusted Jesus to just say something and that it would happen. What does it say about his trust? It says that he trusted Jesus for who Jesus said he was. That he was God. That he had created all things. That he was able to control all things. He also trusted that he was good. You see, he was ready to walk back without Jesus, trusting that he was going to do what he said he was going to do. That he was of integrity, that he could trust him, right? That's the unique element about this guy's faith, is that he would take him at his word, and he had just met him. So he really trusted in what he knew about Jesus. Well, it goes on, and we see Jesus respond to this man's faith. In verse 10 and through 12, it says this, taken back. The word also in other versions says amazed. So, if you want to amaze God, the one who created the heavens and the earth, just do what this man did, okay? Taken back or amazed, Jesus said, I've yet to come across this kind of simple faith in Israel. Simple faith. That's what amazed God. Simple faith. Not great faith, not amazing faith. Not, I'm Lord, I'm going to go across the world and I'm going to do this for you and do that for you. And I don't even need money. I'm just going to do it. Like, big plans that take big God moves. He said, I haven't come across this kind of simple faith. And that amazed him. What does he go on to say? The very people who were supposed to know all about God and know how he works. So he hasn't found that kind of faith in the type of people who are supposed to know God and know how he works. What's he describing there? Christians. God followers. Religious people. People that go to church. He hasn't found that kind of simple trust in all of the people who are supposed to know who God is and how he works. But here's what he says about this soldier who did have the faith. He goes on to say, this man is the vanguard of many outsiders. So he's not considered part of the family of God. He's not a churchgoer. He's an outsider. He will be the vanguard of many outsiders who will soon be coming from all directions, streaming in from the east, pouring in from the west, sitting down at God's kingdom banquet alongside Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Then those who grew up in the faith but had no faith will find themselves outside in the cold, outsiders to grace, and wondering what happened. Now that takes a minute to maybe boil the blood if you're a Christian, but it might, because that just claimed right there that those that think they're Christians because they were born into a church, maybe you were raised by Christian parents, you were brought into the church at an early age, and just by proximity or being there, you feel like, hey, I'm a Christian, right? Because I'm an American, or I'm a Christian because I go to church, or I'm a Christian because of of what I do, or my practices, or my traditions. Do you know that most of these traditions that we do today, that we call church, are fairly new? You see, it's ignorant and arrogant both to think that the traditions and the ways that we do church today are the ways that we've always done it, and that we will always do it. The truth is that the only main thing that God had commanded is that we love one another and love him. And then he gave some instruction on how, and that's eat together, do life together, study my word, get the message out, and make sure that you're teaching one another and holding one another up and loving each other. The ways in which that happen are the functions, right? Those are are we meeting in a building, or are we meeting in a park? Are we doing 4 songs, or we don't do songs at all? Do we have instruments? Do we not have instruments? Those are the traditions that a lot of people, honestly, they go to church and they pick and choose their religious experiment. Religious experience. Feels like an experiment. Their experience, and they do it based on their preferences, on likes and dislikes. And in this case, That's not what pleased God. In this case, the only thing that pleased God was simply trusting in him. Simply trusting. That's what this man displayed. And it impressed him to where he was amazed. So, when we look at this, does it kind of, if you're a non-Christian, give you a little excitement that the non-Christian in this is the one that actually is being praised by Jesus? And that the Christian, if you are a Christian, cultural Christian is what I would call it, someone that just they believe they're in because of their cultural context. Those people, it says, and here's the qualifier, but they really had no faith. A practical faith, like this guy. He trusted him enough to be willing to walk away and just say, you're going to do it. That kind of faith. If they don't have that kind of faith, well, it says here that they'll find themselves outside in the cold, outsiders to grace, wondering what happened. Outsiders to grace. Don't miss that. Don't let that get lost on you. Outsiders to grace. How many Christians or people from a church organization have you ran across that claim they love Jesus, claim they're a churchgoer, claim that they're morally upright, but are the most judgmental individual? Or they just look at you with a kind of looking down at you. Like you're not, they're better than you. Right? Those people have no grace. They're outsiders to grace. That's the game changer right there. Grace and understanding God's grace to an individual, like the Roman soldier in this case, understood that God could give him, if he so choose, would give him grace. And when Jesus said, yes, it's done, basically he accepted that free gift of grace. Hey, you're going to give me something I don't deserve. He didn't pay him. He didn't give him anything. He just said, please do this for me. And he did it out of the gracious heart that he had. And that's the kind of grace that he's looking for, that we would extend it to one another as well. He doesn't. These people that are in religious tendencies and traditions don't understand grace at all. It's the very thing that Jesus came to give. And yet they claim to be image bearers of him, representatives of him. To be honest with you, there are some non-Christians that I've seen that have more grace than Christians. They may not know what it is. It may not be from the right heart. It could sometimes grace for somebody is actually us giving them something they don't deserve because we think we're going to get something back eventually. That's different, right? But in this case, this man couldn't give anything to Jesus, and Jesus just gave to him. That's a whole lot of grace. Now, these people don't understand that. They're not willing to give that kind of love, care, and affection towards other people. As a matter of fact, they're more consumers than anything, and they use God to make themselves look good or to make themselves feel powerful. You see, Jesus in religion, when you talk about religious people, they often use Jesus just like a tool, but it's for their own betterment, their own good, their own justification of their actions. That's not what Jesus is about. He seems in this case to love on a guy who wasn't part of his church, wasn't part of his family, wasn't part of his core group. He just cared about a man who cared about another man. He stepped in and was willing to heal him and do the miraculous for him. People that don't have the same heart as Christ, people that don't have the understanding of what it means to give grace, end up finding themselves outside of God's grace. We see in that situation a man who trusted with simple trust. And maybe you're sitting there and saying, you know what? I don't know that I would have that same kind of trust. I don't know that I could have that same kind of grace. But here's the thing. When Jesus displayed that grace, and this guy received it, we kind of look and put ourselves, oftentimes we'll do that. We'll put ourselves in the story, right? And we'll say, well, I don't know if I would do that. Or I don't know if, I don't know if I would have actually given this guy grace. Or I don't know if I would have, run up to Jesus this way. I don't know if I have the faith to come up to him. And maybe this guy had more faith than I did in who Jesus is or says he is. And so maybe I'm never going to experience that because I don't know if I really trust Jesus. Well, just to put that thought at ease for a second, in Matthew 17:20, it says, it gives the measure of faith that you need. And it says this, it says that if anyone has the faith the size of a mustard seed, it's one of the smallest seeds. If you've never seen a mustard seed, it's like the tip of a pen on your hand. Just a little dot. That's what it is. It's about that size. If you have faith of that size, then he says you can say to that mountain, move over there, and it'll move. In other words, you can do big things if you have just a little tiny, the slightest ounce of faith in who Jesus says he is and that he's good. So don't put yourself in a category that says, well, I don't have that kind of faith that this man had. You just have to have a little. What happens when we trust in Jesus with a little bit of faith that we need? We experience the same kind of thing this guy experienced. We gain his care, his affection, his love, his promises. This man, Jesus, treated a non-Christian who had a little bit of faith in him really, really, really well. He made him a part of his family. He took care of his needs. He took care of the needs of the individual that was in his household as a servant. Think about that. This guy's just a servant. He was a slave. He's a nobody, but he ends up healed. It says in that very moment. Right here in verse 13, that's what it... Basically, at the very end, it says, the captain, in verse 13, the captain gets his servant healed and becomes the first of many to receive grace or entrance into heaven. He was healed in that very moment, the verse goes on to say in 13. It baffles me that we don't trust. We trust in a lot of things. We trust in ourselves. We trust in our friends sometimes at certain measures, our family at sometimes at certain measures. But we're not, one of the biggest drums we bang today is that we're not willing to trust in establishments like churches, or we're not willing to trust in churches in general or church leaders. I do understand that there's a lot of people out there that are muddying the name of Christianity. And that's essentially what Jesus is saying here, is saying in this story that there are a lot of people that claim to be Jesus followers or Christians or religious people that won't ever even end up in the kingdom of heaven. They're not really representing him, and they don't look like him. And so when we look out into the church world, if you will, it could be overwhelming and it could be confusing, because what you expect to receive is what we read about Jesus, the love of Jesus, his grace, his mercy, his care and affection. And yet we walk into those 4 church walls and we see so much different garbage that does not reflect him. And therefore, then you immediately say, well, why do I want to be a part of that? Shoot, the Rotary Club is nicer than these guys, right? We don't go to church, though. We are the church. The people that are Jesus followers, disciples of Jesus, students of the way of Jesus, people that really pursue him and his ways. They will also pursue allowing him to work in them, to work out the stuff that this world has put in, and to put in his heart, to love the people we used to not love, to care for the people we used to not care for. Now that's a process, right? It's an ongoing process. The Bible calls it sanctification. Happens over time. And so when we walk into those 4 walls, what we're going to find is people in stages of the process. Some that are brand new in it, so when you talk to them, it stings. They're not nice. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. It depends on the day, and that they're probably in the midst of the process. And then some. And I find it to be very few. But some that are loving and caring and considerate. And then you hear, maybe you get to know them a little bit, and you hear stories about them in their past, right? And everyone's like, dude, that's not who they were. Oh my gosh, drug addict, used to steal from me, or used to lie, or man, the dude or the chick was just a waste. They should have just thrown them in the jail and locked up the key, man. But now that person has changed. It's because they've actually experienced grace. You see, you can't give grace out until you've received grace. You don't even understand it. That's what their problem was. They just sat in a system thinking they knew everything about it, but the problem was the system wasn't what they were supposed to understand. It's the person of Jesus they were supposed to understand. That's what we're going to be looking at for the next 8 to 10 weeks. Different encounters like this, where Jesus interacts with an individual, and we analyze their life, and we analyze their interaction, and we look at how Jesus changes a life, pours into people, gives grace. And also, we're going to look at how it looks a little bit different, how he looks a little bit different than some of the things we see in church, and why. If this message has really been good to you in bringing some clarity, helpful for you in a way that explains Jesus more, helps you want to have a relationship with him, or to test out that little bit of faith that you have, I would simply say, the same way this man came to Jesus, you should come to Jesus with simple faith. Just by saying, Lord, would you show me you're real? Would you help me to see the truth in who you are and not judge you according to what I've seen in this world that claims to represent you? If you pray that or talk to God, prayer is just talking to God. If you just talk to God in that way, you're going to find a Jesus that is very caring, very loving, and very concerned about the things you're concerned about. I invite you to come back. We're going to be doing more of these, as I said, week in, week out. And if this is something that you think is beneficial for those around you, your friends, your family, man, like the post, comment. I'd love to interact with you guys. Go ahead, and if you're on YouTube, hit that little bell so you get the notifications so that you could see the interactions that we have coming up with Jesus and others. Until then, love you.